Commander Zealous stood on the bridge of his ship and watched another world die. The screens showed flames spreading across the surface of the colony below. The Krelith were down there, consuming everything. His people were dying, and he could do nothing to stop it. The Vakrian people had never been warriors. For 3,000 years they had built their civilization on peace and trade. They had no weapons that could stop an invasion like this. The Krelith swarm had appeared 6 months ago from the empty space between galaxies, and since then, they had been unstoppable. Zealous looked at the data streaming across his screens. The Krelith were like insects, but worse. They ate everything organic and turned it into more soldiers, more ships, more destruction. Every battle his people lost made the enemy stronger. Every world that fell gave them more resources. His second officer approached him with fear in her eyes. "Commander, Sector 9 has fallen. The Krelith are moving toward our core worlds now. At this rate, we have maybe 3 months before they reach Vakria Prime. 3 months until his homeworld died. 3 months until his entire species might be extinct." Zealous made a decision that terrified him. He walked to his private terminal and accessed the restricted database. The file he opened was marked with warnings in every language his people knew. The file was about humanity. The Vakrians had discovered Earth 40 years ago but had never made contact. The reports from their scout ships had been clear. Humans were too dangerous. They came from what the galaxy called a death world, a planet, so hostile that only the most aggressive species could survive there. Earth had predators that could kill with ease, diseases that ravaged populations, and weather that destroyed cities. The humans had climbed to the top of their food chain through violence and determination. The report said humans were territorial, aggressive, and unpredictable. They fought each other constantly, even within their own nations. Their entire history was written in blood and war. The Vakrian scouts had recommended total avoidance. But now Zealous had no choice. His people were dying. They needed someone who understood war. They needed warriors. They needed humans. "Send a message to Earth," Zealous ordered. "Tell them we need military assistance. Offer them whatever they want. Technology, territory, resources. Just make them come." The message was sent through the quantum communication network. It traveled faster than light, crossing the distance to Earth in seconds. Zealous waited, wondering if the humans would even respond. Why would they help a species they had never met? On Earth, Admiral Kyle Harrison was in a meeting when the alert came through. He was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen too many battles. He had commanded the Terran Defense Fleet for 10 years, but he had never received a message like this. He read the transmission 3 times. An alien species was asking for help. They were being invaded by something called the Krelith Swarm. They were offering Earth almost anything in exchange for military aid. Harrison called his aide. "Get me the president, now, and wake up every ship captain we have. I want the fleet ready to deploy within 12 hours. The message reached Captain Lisa Chen while she was running combat drills with her crew. She commanded the TDF Retribution, one of the newest warships in the fleet. Chen was a career officer who had joined the military at 18 and worked her way up through skill and determination. She gathered her officers in the briefing room. The holographic display showed what little data the Vakrians had sent about the Krelith. The aliens looked like giant insects, with hard shells and multiple limbs. Their ships were organic, grown rather than built. Lieutenant Jake Morrison studied the images. He was Chen's tactical officer, a quiet man who had grown up hunting in the mountains and understood how predators thought. "They use swarm tactics," he said. "Overwhelming numbers. No subtlety." "Then, we teach them about quality versus quantity," Chen replied. "Humans have been killing things that outnumber us since we lived in caves. This is just a bigger cave." The fleet assembled near Mars, 47 warships, each carrying enough firepower to level a city. The crews were ready. Most of them had never seen combat against aliens, but they had trained for this moment. They knew what Earth expected from them. Admiral Harrison addressed the fleet from his flagship, the TDF Olympus. His face appeared on screens across every ship. "People of Earth," he began. "We've been asked to help a species we've never met fight an enemy we've never seen. Some might ask why we should risk our lives for strangers. I'll tell you why. Because someone is being hurt, and we can stop it. Because being strong means protecting those who aren't. Because this is what humanity does. The ships entered Slipstream Drive together. The technology allowed them to cross vast distances in days instead of years. They headed toward Vacrian space at speeds that would have killed a human body, if not for the inertial dampeners. On the Retribution, Chen walked through her ship. She checked on the Marines who would board enemy vessels. She visited engineering where the reactors hummed with barely contained power. She stopped by the medical bay where doctors prepared for casualties. Everyone was ready. Sergeant Amy Rodriguez led one of the Marine squads. She was a short woman with hard eyes and scars from a dozen training accidents. She had grown up in a rough neighborhood and joined the military to escape. Now she was one of the best soldiers in the fleet. "You scared?" one of her Marines asked as they checked their weapons. Rodriguez smiled. "Terrified. But fear keeps you alive. It makes you careful. These bugs have been killing civilians for months. Time they met someone who fights back." The fleet dropped out of Slipstream Drive at the edge of Vacrian space. Zealous was waiting for them with his ships. He had expected maybe 5 or 10 human vessels. When 47 warships appeared on his sensors, all bristling with weapons, he felt his fear shift from the Krelith to these newcomers. The human ships were different from anything he knew. They were angular and aggressive, designed for war in every line. Weapon ports covered their hulls. Their engines burned with power that seemed excessive for simple travel. Admiral Harrison's face appeared on Zealous's screen. The human looked calm, almost bored. "Commander Zealous, this is Admiral Kyle Harrison of the Terran Defense Fleet. We got your message. Where's the threat?" Zealous transmitted the location of the nearest Krelith swarm. His hands shook as he added, "Admiral, you should know they outnumber your force 30 to 1. Harrison smiled. It was not a kind expression. "Good. Then it's a fair fight. Harrison out." The human fleet moved forward with purpose. They split into smaller groups without seeming to communicate, each ship knowing its role. Zealous watched in fascination and horror. The humans moved like predators, like sharks circling prey. The Krelith swarm detected the newcomers. To them, the humans were just more prey, more biomass to consume. The insects had destroyed a dozen species. These humans would be no different. They were very wrong. The Krelith swarm moved toward the human fleet like a wave of darkness. Over 1,000 ships, each one a living creature bred for war. They had crushed every defense the Vacrians had tried. They expected these newcomers to run or die. Hive Queen Zerathix controlled the swarm from her massive flagship. She was connected to every ship, every warrior through a telepathic link. She felt their hunger, their eagerness to consume. The humans registered as small prey, weak and alone. "Consume them," she commanded through the hive mind. "Add their flesh to the swarm." Captain Lisa Chen watched the Krelith approach on her screens. The enemy ships were ugly things, covered in chitin and glowing with bioluminescence. They moved in a massive cluster with no formation, no strategy. Just raw numbers. "Tactical analysis," Chen ordered. Lieutenant Morrison studied his displays. "They're coming straight at us. No defensive positioning, no reserves, no tactical depth. They fight like animals." "Then we fight like humans," Chen said. "All ships execute scatter pattern alpha. Make them chase us." The human fleet suddenly broke apart. Instead of grouping together for defense, they split into dozens of smaller units. The Krelith swarm hesitated, confused. Their prey was supposed to cluster together in fear. Chen smiled coldly. "Weapons free. Show them what real predators look like." The Retribution's main railguns fired. The weapons used magnetic acceleration to launch solid slugs at incredible speeds. The projectiles crossed the distance in seconds and punched through the Krelith ships like they were made of paper. The kinetic energy alone was enough to vaporize everything they touched. Across the human fleet, similar weapons opened fire. Railguns, missiles, plasma cannons, and particle beams created a storm of destruction. The Krelith had thick armor and regenerating hulls, but nothing could withstand the sheer violence of human weapons. But the missiles were special. Human weapons designers had studied the Krelith biology data the Vacrians provided. They had created warheads that burned at 5,000 degrees. hot enough to boil the organic fluids inside Kralith ships. When the missiles hit, entire vessels burst into flames from the inside. Commander Morrison coordinated the attack with practiced ease. He had grown up hunting, learning to read animal behavior and exploit weaknesses. This was just hunting on a larger scale. "Target their big ships first," he called out. "Kill the elephants and the herd panics." The TDF Vengeance, commanded by Captain Ben Clark, pushed directly into the thickest part of the Kralith formation. Clark was a bold commander who believed the best defense was overwhelming offense. His ship took damage as Kralith weapons fired back, but he didn't slow down. "All power to forward shields and weapons," Clark ordered. "We're going through them." The Vengeance carved a burning path through the swarm. Every weapon on the ship fired continuously, creating a cone of destruction ahead of them. Kralith ships tried to surround them, but the humans moved too fast, fought too hard. A Kralith boarding pod latched onto the Vengeance's hull. Acid ate through the armor, creating a breach. Kralith warriors poured through, expecting easy prey. They found Sergeant Amy Rodriguez and her Marines waiting. The Kralith were fast and strong, with razor-sharp claws and mandibles that could bite through steel. But humans had evolved as pack hunters. They fought together with instinctive coordination that no training could fully teach. "Contact front," Rodriguez shouted. Her assault rifle chattered, sending rounds down the corridor. The lead Kralith warrior took 6 shots to the chest and kept coming. Rodriguez switched to her sidearm and put 3 rounds into its head. It dropped. "They're tough," she told her squad. "Aim for the head cluster. That's where the brain is." The Marines formed a firing line, their weapons creating an overlapping field of fire. The Kralith charged into it and died. When one Marine's weapon ran empty, another stepped forward to cover. It was brutal, efficient, and effective. Back on the Retribution's bridge, Chen monitored the overall battle. The Kralith were learning, trying to adapt. They began attempting to surround the human ships, using their numbers to trap individual vessels. Admiral Harrison's voice came through on all channels. "All ships, they're trying to envelope us. Don't let them dictate the fight. Begin compression maneuver." The human fleet suddenly pulled together into a tight sphere. Every ship faced outward, weapons pointing in all directions. When the Kralith closed in from all sides, the humans simply fired in every direction at once. It was a tactic that would have been suicide for most species. Fighting surrounded meant no escape, no reinforcements, no safe direction. For humans, it just meant they didn't have to aim as carefully. Every shot hit something. The Kralith swarm found itself caught in a killing field. Human weapons created overlapping fields of fire that nothing could survive. Ships that pushed through the outer layers found only more guns waiting. The swarm's advantage of numbers became a weakness as they got in each other's way. Hive Queen Zerathix felt pain lance through her mind as hundreds of ships died. These humans fought like nothing she had encountered. They were coordinated but independent, disciplined but creative. Each ship made its own decisions, exploited its own opportunities. She couldn't predict them. "Withdraw," she commanded. "Reformat." The TDF Retribution's railgun spoke again. Captain Chen had been tracking the largest Kralith ship, waiting for a clear shot. The slugs crossed space faster than the Kralith could react and punched clean through the organic hull, rupturing the core where Zerathix resided. The Hive Queen died instantly. Through the telepathic link, every Kralith felt her death. Their unified consciousness shattered. Ships that had moved as one organism suddenly became individuals, confused and frightened. The swarm didn't retreat. It broke. Ships scattered in every direction, some trying to flee, others attacking randomly. The humans pursued without mercy, hunting down the survivors one by one. Chen watched her screens as the Kralith formation collapsed. "All ships pursue and destroy. Don't let any escape to report back." It was cold calculation. If the Kralith learned from this defeat, they might adapt. Better to ensure no survivors could carry lessons back to the rest of the swarm. The battle lasted 17 minutes from first shot to last. Over 1,000 Kralith ships were destroyed. The human fleet lost 3 vessels and took damage to a dozen others. They had been outnumbered 30-1 and won decisively. On the harmonious dawn, Commander Zealous watched in stunned silence. His people had been fighting the Kralith for 6 months and had never won a single battle. The humans had arrived and annihilated a major swarm in less time than it took to eat a meal. "Open a channel to Admiral Harrison," Zealous said quietly. The human admiral appeared on screen. His uniform was slightly scorched from a small fire on his bridge. He looked tired but satisfied. Commander Zealous, the immediate threat has been neutralized. What other Krelith positions can you show us? Zealous transmitted the data with shaking hands. There were 3 more major swarms, each as large as the one the humans had just destroyed. Admiral, your losses are acceptable, Harrison interrupted. This is what we do, Commander. This is what species from Deathworlds are good at. You called for help. We're here to provide it. Point us at the next target. Zealous looked at the human admiral and realized something profound. Humans didn't just know how to fight. They were built for it. Every aspect of their tactics, their weapons, their coordination, spoke of a species that had been at war for thousands of years. Not against aliens, but against their own world, their own nature, each other. There's a major Krelith concentration in the Droma sector, Zealous said, but it's heavily defended. It would take us months to— We'll handle it, Harrison said. Send us the coordinates. And Commander, get your civilian evacuation ships ready. This is going to get worse before it gets better. The human fleet regrouped, damage control teams working to repair the wounded ships, medical bays filled with casualties, but the losses were light by human standards. Every crew member knew they had gotten off easy. In the Retribution's mess hall, Marines celebrated their first victory against aliens. Rodriguez sat with her squad, cleaning weapons and sharing stories. Did you see the look on that bug's face when it came through the breach? One Marine laughed. Like it expected us to run. They don't know us yet, Rodriguez said. They think we're prey because we're smaller than them. They'll learn. Humans have been killing things bigger than us since we figured out how to throw rocks. Captain Chen visited the wounded in medical. She stopped by each bed thanking the injured for their service. It was something her first captain had taught her. Never forget the cost of victory. A young ensign with burns on his arms looked up at her. Captain, are all the battles going to be like this? Chen considered lying but decided on the truth. Probably worse. The Krelith will learn from this. They'll adapt. But so will we. That's what humans do best. We adapt, we overcome, we survive. Admiral Harrison stood alone in his ready room looking at the casualty reports. 347 dead, over 1,000 wounded. The victory had not been free, but he had kept his promise. He had protected the Vakrians. He had shown the Krelith that humanity would not be easy prey. Now he had to finish what he started. Admiral Kyle Harrison stood in the war room of the TDF Olympus, studying holographic maps of Krelith territory. Captain Lisa Chen and several other senior officers gathered around the projection. The map showed Krelith-controlled space like a spreading infection, red zones marking occupied worlds. The Vakrians estimate 6 months to push the Krelith back world by world, Harrison said. He pointed to a cluster of red zones deep in enemy space. 6 months of their civilians dying while these bugs dig in deeper. That's unacceptable. Chen had served under Harrison long enough to recognize that tone. What are you thinking, sir? Harrison manipulated the hologram, zooming in on a system far behind enemy lines. Intelligence says the Krelith have a central breeding complex here in the Dromath system. It's where they grow new warriors and queens. We take that out, the entire invasion collapses. Lieutenant Jake Morrison studied the tactical display. That's 12 systems behind enemy lines, sir. We'd have to fight through constant resistance. Not if we're fast enough, Harrison replied. We don't fight through them. We go around them. Jump straight to the target, hit it with everything we have, and get out before they can respond. Captain Ben Clark spoke from across the table. It's risky, sir. If they catch us that deep without support, then we die, Harrison said simply. But we complete the mission first. That's the job. The room fell silent. Every officer understood what Harrison was asking. This wasn't about coming home. This was about ending the threat, whatever the cost. It was the same calculation humans had been making since their ancestors first defended their caves from predators. I'm in, Chen said without hesitation. The retribution can be ready in 6 hours. One by one, the other captains agreed. Within 12 hours, the human fleet had been resupplied and repaired at Vakrian stations. They were ready for the deep strike. Commander Zealous tried to talk Harrison out of it. Admiral, this is suicide. You'll be cut off from any support. If something goes wrong, then we improvise, Harrison interrupted. We didn't come here to play it safe, Commander. We came here to win, and winners take risks. The human fleet entered slipstream drive together. Their ships cut through space at impossible speeds, bypassing 3 major Krelith strongholds. They ignored smaller fleets racing toward the heart of the enemy invasion. On the Retribution, Chen walked through the ship's corridors. She found Sergeant Rodriguez in the Marine barracks helping her squad prepare for potential boarding actions. "Captain on deck," someone called. The Marines started to stand. "As you were," Chen waved them down. "Rodriguez, your people ready?" "Always, ma'am," Rodriguez replied, checking her rifle. "These bugs have been killing civilians for months. About time someone showed them what happens when you pick on the weak." Chen moved to engineering, where Lieutenant Paul Grant supervised the reactor systems. He was a quiet man who had worked on nuclear reactors before joining the military. He understood power in ways most people couldn't grasp. "How's our power situation?" Chen asked. "Reactors running at 98% efficiency," Grant reported. "We can maintain this speed for another 16 hours easily. If you need emergency combat power, I can give you 120% for maybe 10 minutes before things start melting." "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Chen said, though they both knew it probably would. The human fleet emerged from Slipstream Drive at the edge of the Dromath system and immediately went to battle stations. What they saw made even experienced officers pause. The Krelith breeding complex hung in orbit around a dead moon. It was a massive organic structure that pulsed with disgusting life, bigger than most cities. Around it, thousands of smaller vessels and stations served as nurseries for new warriors. "My God," Morrison whispered. "That thing is huge." "Then we'll need bigger guns," Chen replied coldly. "Load the Nova warheads." Nova warheads were humanity's darkest weapon. Antimatter bombs wrapped in fusion triggers. Each one could crack a planet's crust. The Terran Defense Fleet had brought 12 of them. Regulations and treaties be damned. Admiral Harrison's voice came through on all channels. "All ships, that complex is the heart of the Krelith invasion. Destroy it and we break their war machine. We've got maybe 20 minutes before every bug in this sector converges on us. Make them count. Weapons free." The human fleet opened fire with everything they had. Railguns, missiles, plasma cannons, and particle beams created a storm of destruction. The Krelith defenders scrambled to respond, but the sheer violence of the human assault overwhelmed them. Captain Clark pushed the Vengeance straight toward the breeding complex. His ship took fire from dozens of defensive emplacements, armor buckling under the assault. But he didn't stop. "Nova warhead armed," his weapons officer reported, voice steady despite the ship shaking around them. "Fire," Clark ordered. The missiles streaked across space. Krelith point defense systems tried desperately to intercept it. 3 weapons got close. The warhead detonated anyway. For an instant, a miniature sun bloomed in the Dromath system. The antimatter cascade vaporized everything within 10,000 kilometers. The breeding complex simply ceased to exist, converted to plasma and radiation in a fraction of a second. 11 more Nova warheads followed, targeting the nursery stations and support facilities. Within 5 minutes, the Krelith's entire strategic reserve in the system had been annihilated. Years of breeding and preparation gone, but the swarm was already responding. Thousands of Krelith ships poured into the system from nearby space, converging on the human fleet like antibodies attacking an infection. The humans had kicked the nest, and now the nest was angry. "All ships fighting withdrawal," Harrison ordered calmly. "We've done what we came for. Now we survive long enough to tell everyone about it." The human fleet formed a defensive globe and began moving toward the slipstream jump point. They fired constantly, keeping the Krelith at bay. But they were outnumbered 100 to 1 now, and the bugs were learning from previous defeats. The TDF Guardian, commanded by Captain Ellen Price, took the brunt of the counterattack. Her shields failed under concentrated fire, and boarding pods started latching onto her hull like parasites. "All hands, repel boarders," Price announced over the shipwide channel. She drew her sidearm and checked the magazine. "And someone get my shields back online." In the Guardian's corridors, humans and Krelith fought in brutal close quarters. The aliens were vicious, but humans had evolved as pack hunters. Every Marine knew how to kill efficiently, and they worked together with terrifying coordination. Corporal Danny Wright found himself face-to-face with a Krelith warrior when his rifle jammed. The creature lunged with razor-sharp claws. Wright sidestepped using reflexes trained through countless hours of combat drills, grabbed the alien's arm, and used its own momentum to slam it into the bulkhead. Before it could recover, he had drawn his combat knife and drove it through the creature's eye cluster. "Contact eliminated," he reported, clearing the jam in his rifle like it was just another day at work. The retribution covered the Guardian's escape, Chen's ship taking punishing fire. Alarms blared across the bridge as systems failed one after another, but Chen's voice remained steady and calm. Morrison, keep those point defenses active. Rodriguez, we've got breaches on decks 7 and 9. Seal and clear. On it, Captain, Rodriguez replied, leading her squad toward the breaches at a run. The human fleet fought like a cornered predator, all teeth and fury and refusal to quit. They had come to destroy the breeding complex, and they had succeeded. Now they just had to live long enough for the victory to matter. Admiral Harrison watched his tactical display as the fleet inched toward the jump point. They had lost 4 ships and the rest were heavily damaged. But they were going to make it. Slipstream in 30 seconds, his navigator announced. All ships prepare for emergency jump on my mark, Harrison ordered. The Kralith threw everything at them, desperate to prevent their escape. Jump now. The human fleet vanished into slipstream drive, leaving behind the burning wreckage of the Kralith's future and their hopes of conquest. The human fleet emerged from slipstream drive back in Vakrian space, battered and bleeding but victorious. Commander Zealous waited with support ships, his expression mixing relief with disbelief as he read the casualty reports. 4 ships lost, 18 heavily damaged, over 300 humans dead. To the Vakrians it would have been a disaster. To Admiral Harrison it was apparently the cost of doing business. Admiral, your losses, Zealous began. We completed the mission, Harrison interrupted. The Kralith breeding complex is gone. Their strategic reserve is destroyed. Now we finish this war. Over the next 3 weeks everything changed. Without their central breeding complex, the Kralith swarms lost coordination. Individual groups of ships in occupied worlds found themselves cut off, operating on instinct rather than unified strategy. The hive mind had been damaged and the swarm was confused. The humans didn't give them time to recover. Captain Lisa Chen led her battle group in a series of lightning raids, hitting Kralith positions and withdrawing before reinforcements arrived. Her tactics were simple: be unpredictable, be violent, and never let the enemy rest. Fighting a hive mind is like fighting one big organism, Chen explained to Vakrian observers who watched her plan operations. You make them react instead of act. Keep them off balance. Hit where they're weak. Every engagement happens on your terms, not theirs. The Vakrians watched in amazement as human forces retook occupied worlds with minimal civilian casualties. Instead of grinding sieges that lasted months, humans used precision strikes and special operations. They moved fast, hit hard, and disappeared before the enemy could respond effectively. Sergeant Amy Rodriguez specialized in these operations. Her Marine unit would drop onto occupied worlds, locate Kralith command nodes, and eliminate them. It was dangerous work, but humans had been doing dangerous work since they first walked upright on the African plains. On the occupied world of Tarsus Prime, Rodriguez led her squad through ruined streets. The Kralith had turned the city into a fortress, but fortresses only worked if you knew where the enemy was coming from. Rodriguez's team moved like ghosts. Contact 100 meters, her point man reported quietly. Suppressing fire, Rodriguez ordered. Her squad's rifles chattered in short, controlled bursts. The Kralith warriors couldn't tell where the shots were coming from. 2 Marines moved to flanking positions while the aliens were pinned down. The engagement lasted 3 minutes. 12 Kralith warriors died, 0 human casualties. It was the result of training, experience, and evolutionary advantages the bugs couldn't match. Target building secure, Rodriguez reported. Moving on the Sub-Queen's position. They found the Sub-Queen in what used to be the city's central square. She was a bloated creature surrounded by warrior guards, directing the local Kralith forces. Rodriguez didn't waste time on a ground assault. She called in an orbital strike from the Retribution. 30 seconds later, a railgun round traveling at a fraction of light speed erased the entire city block. The Sub-Queen and her guards simply ceased to exist. Sub-Queen eliminated, Rodriguez reported. Civilian casualties 0. Tarsus Prime is ahead of liberation schedule. Across Vakrian space, similar operations played out. Human forces, sometimes working alone and sometimes with Vakrian support units, systematically dismantled the Kralith occupation. The aliens had never faced an enemy that fought this way, combining overwhelming firepower with surgical precision. Lieutenant Jake Morrison coordinated fleet movements from the Retribution's tactical center. His screen showed dozens of ongoing operations across multiple star systems. A Vakrian liaison officer watched over his shoulder. trying to understand how one human could process so much information. "How do you track all of this?" the Vakrian asked. "Our command systems require multiple minds working in consensus. We evolved for it," Morrison replied, marking 3 new priority targets without pausing. "Human brains are built for pattern recognition. We had to track herds of animals, predict weather, coordinate hunts. This is just the same skill on a bigger scale." The Vakrians began to understand something profound about humans. They weren't just better warriors. They were designed for war at a fundamental level. Their biology, their psychology, their entire evolutionary history had prepared them for organized violence in ways that peaceful species couldn't comprehend. But humans also showed unexpected restraint. When clearing occupied cities, Captain Ben Clark's forces took extraordinary risks to avoid civilian casualties. His Marines would accept harder fights and higher danger, rather than use weapons that might harm innocents. Why? A rescued Vakrian civilian asked Clark after his forces liberated her city. "You could have simply bombarded from orbit. Much safer for your soldiers." Clark looked at her with tired eyes. "Because we're not monsters, ma'am. We're just very good at fighting them. There's a difference." The contrast troubled the Vakrians. Humans could switch from savage violence to gentle compassion in moments. They operated with a moral flexibility that species with simpler ethical frameworks struggled to understand. One minute they were killing enemies without mercy. The next they were risking their lives to save strangers. Admiral Harrison met with the Vakrian High Council to discuss the war's progress. The holographic maps showed Krelith forces in full retreat, their occupied territories shrinking every day like ice melting in the sun. "Another month? Maybe less," Harrison predicted. "We've broken their logistics, killed their queens, and scattered their forces. Now we're just cleaning up the remnants." Council Prime Viridian, the leader of the Vakrian government, studied the human admiral carefully. "And after the war ends, what will humanity want in return for this aid?" Harrison considered the question. "Trade agreements, embassy exchanges, mutual defense treaties. We're not conquerors, Council Prime, we're problem solvers. You had a problem. We solved it. Now we'd like to be friends." Viridian studied Harrison closely. This human had ordered actions that killed millions of Krelith. He had risked his fleet on suicide missions. He had brought weapons that could destroy planets. And now he sat here calmly discussing trade agreements like they were negotiating a business contract. "You terrify us, Admiral," Viridian admitted quietly. "Your capacity for violence, your efficiency at destruction. How can we trust that you won't turn that power against us someday?" Harrison met the alien's eyes. "Because we don't prey on the weak, Council Prime, we protect them. Yes, we're dangerous. Earth made us that way. But we use that danger to keep safe the people who can't fight. That's what species from Deathworlds do. We survived by being the scariest thing in the room. Now we use that to protect others from things that want to hurt them." Viridian nodded slowly, beginning to understand. Humans were dangerous precisely because they had evolved to fight danger. They were violent because violence had been necessary for survival on their brutal homeworld. But they had also learned to channel that violence, to use it with purpose rather than indiscriminately. "Then let us hope," Viridian said carefully, "that humanity never forgets that purpose." The war continued, but now the outcome was inevitable. The Krelith were broken, scattered, and dying. They had come to this sector expecting easy prey. Instead, they had found humans, and humans were apex predators wearing the face of civilization. On the Retribution, Chen reviewed the latest battle reports with satisfaction. Every day brought new victories. Every day brought more worlds freed from Krelith occupation. The mission was succeeding beyond expectations. "Captain," Morrison said from his console, "we're receiving reports of a major Krelith concentration in the Keltor system. Looks like the remnants of 3 separate swarms have gathered there." Chen studied the tactical data. It would be the last major battle of the war. "Get me Admiral Harrison. It's time to finish this." The final battle would take place in the Keltor system. Admiral Kyle Harrison assembled the entire human fleet for the engagement, joined now by Vakrian support ships that had learned to fight under human instruction. It was the largest combined force either species had ever assembled. Captain Lisa Chen stood on the Retribution's bridge, watching the Krelith fleet hold position near a gas giant. The enemy ships weren't moving, weren't attacking. They were waiting. That was new behavior for the usually aggressive swarm. "They know this is the end," she said to Lieutenant Morrison. "They've got nowhere left to run." Cornered animals are the most dangerous kind. So are cornered humans, Morrison replied, and we're better at it than they are. The Kralith had gathered the remnants of 3 separate swarms. Without their breeding complex, without their queens, these were the last major Kralith forces in the sector. They had maybe 2,000 ships, all battle-damaged and worn from months of fighting. The human fleet numbered 60 vessels, including the Vakrian support ships. They were outnumbered more than 30 to 1, but no one seemed concerned. The humans had fought worse odds and won. Admiral Harrison addressed the fleet one final time. This is it, people. The last major Kralith force in this sector. They came here thinking they'd found easy prey. We're going to show them what happens when you underestimate Earth. All ships, weapons free. Let's finish this war. The battle began at maximum range. Human railguns and missiles created a wall of steel that the Kralith flew straight into. But these weren't the confused, leaderless bugs the humans had been fighting for weeks. These were survivors, the toughest and most adaptable Kralith warriors. They knew what human weapons could do, and they'd learned to fear them. The Kralith charged in a desperate mass assault, accepting horrific losses to close the distance. When they reached the human lines, the fighting became brutal and close. Ships rammed each other. Boarding actions erupted across the fleet. The vacuum filled with debris and frozen bodies. On the TDF Guardian, Captain Ellen Price watched her screens as boarding pods latched onto her hull. She'd been expecting this. The Kralith had learned that human ships were most vulnerable when boarded. They were trying to overwhelm her crew with sheer numbers. All hands prepare for boarders, Price announced calmly. Then she gave an order that surprised her crew. Authorization code Alpha 97. Initiate emergency decompression in all compromised sections. Throughout the ship, airlocks blew open. Atmosphere vented into space in explosive bursts. Humans in pressure suits survived. The Kralith, caught in the sudden decompression, died instantly. It was brutal, desperate, and effective. Sergeant Amy Rodriguez led a counterattack through the Guardian's corridors, her Marines moving with the precision of a machine. They had fought these aliens for months now. They knew every weakness, every tactic, every vulnerability. Frag out, Rodriguez called, tossing a grenade around a corner. The explosion shredded a group of Kralith warriors. Her squad advanced through the smoke without hesitation, weapons firing in controlled bursts. In the Guardian's engineering section, Lieutenant Paul Grant fought with whatever tools he could find. A wrench, a plasma cutter, even his bare hands when necessary. A Kralith warrior tried to sabotage the reactor. Grant tackled it, grappling with the creature despite its superior strength. Another engineer grabbed a length of pipe and clubbed the alien's head until it stopped moving. They didn't have guns down here, but humans had been killing things with tools since before they discovered fire. Reactor secured, Grant reported, breathing hard and bleeding from several cuts. Engineering section holds. Across the battle space, similar scenes played out. Humans fighting with skill, determination, and a stubborn refusal to quit that the Kralith couldn't match. The aliens were tough and numerous and desperate. But humans were all that, plus creative, adaptable, and willing to try insane tactics if they might work. Captain Ben Clark on the Vengeance found himself in a duel with a Kralith heavy cruiser. His ship was faster, but the alien vessel had better armor. So Clark did something no sane commander would attempt. He shut down his shields, diverted all that power to engines and weapons, and accelerated straight at the enemy. "Sir, what are you doing?" his helmsman shouted. "Improvising," Clark replied calmly. "Collision course." All power to forward guns. The Vengeance raced toward the Kralith ship, both vessels firing everything they had. Shots hammered Clark's armor, punching holes through the hull. People died at their stations. But Clark didn't stop. At the last possible moment, the Vengeance rolled, presenting minimum profile to the enemy. The aliens' shots missed. Clark's didn't. The forward battery fired at point-blank range, carving the Kralith cruiser in half. The two ships passed within meters of each other, close enough to see faces through viewports. Then the alien vessel was behind them, breaking apart. "Helm, get us back in formation," Clark ordered, his voice steady despite the damage reports flooding in. "And somebody put out that fire in Section 12. Admiral Harrison coordinated the fleet from the Olympus, his experienced eyes reading the tactical situation. The battle was turning. The Kralith were breaking, but they had hurt humanity in the process. 7 ships lost, dozens more damaged, thousands of casualties. It was time to end this. All ships execute convergence maneuver, Harrison ordered. Form on my position. We're going to punch straight through their center and kill them all. The human fleet contracted into a tight formation, every ship supporting the others. They pushed into the heart of the Krelith swarm like a spear, and the aliens couldn't stop them. Human discipline and coordination overcame raw numbers. The Retribution's railguns fired continuously, the barrels glowing red-hot from sustained use. Chen's crew worked like they'd been training for this moment their whole lives. Damage control teams raced to repair systems faster than they could fail. Weapons crews loaded and fired with mechanical precision. Everyone knew their job and did it perfectly. We're losing forward shields, Morrison reported. Hull breaches on multiple decks. Seal them and keep firing, Chen ordered. We don't stop until every last one is dead. The battle reached its peak when Admiral Harrison's Olympus closed with the largest remaining Krelith vessel. It had been a hive carrier before its queen died. Now it was just a massive warship full of angry, desperate aliens. The two flagships traded fire at ranges measured in kilometers. You could see the damage with naked eyes. Armor peeling away. Holes punched through hulls. Fires burning in the vacuum. Nova warhead ready, sir? Harrison's weapons officer reported. Save it, Harrison said. Conventional weapons. I want them to know they were beaten fairly. The Olympus's main battery fired and the Krelith ship shuddered under the impact. Return fire scored Harrison's hull, but the ship held together. They traded blows like ancient battleships, neither backing down. One more salvo, Harrison said quietly. Everything we have. Every gun on the Olympus fired at once. The combined firepower punched through the Krelith vessel's armor and detonated its biological reactor. The alien ship came apart in a series of explosions, taking the last major Krelith command structure with it. The remaining Krelith ships, leaderless and broken, scattered in panic. The human fleet pursued, hunting them down one by one. No mercy, no quarter. This ended today. 3 hours later it was over. The Keltor system floated in silence, full of wreckage and frozen bodies. The Krelith invasion force had been completely destroyed. Not defeated. Not scattered. Annihilated. Captain Chen walked through the Retribution's corridors past exhausted crew members and damaged bulkheads. They had won, but the cost had been steep. She stopped by medical where Rodriguez was being treated for burns. How's the squad? Chen asked quietly. We lost 3. Rodriguez replied, her voice flat. They died holding engineering when the bugs broke through. Chen nodded. There would be memorial services later. Families to notify. Letters to write. For now, they were still on duty. The human fleet gathered in the aftermath, counting their losses and beginning repairs. They had won the war, but victory never came free. The human fleet gathered in Vacrian prime space 3 days after the final battle. The ships showed their scars. Scorched armor. Patched hulls. Empty crew quarters where friends had once lived. But they had won. The Krelith invasion was over. Admiral Kyle Harrison stood before the Vacrian High Council in a formal ceremony. He wore his dress uniform, pressed and perfect despite everything his ship had endured. Behind him stood the captains who had survived the war. Chen, Clark, Price, and others who had proven themselves in the fire of combat. Council Prime Viridian approached Harrison carrying a small crystal that glowed with soft light. This is the Star of Valor, the highest honor our civilization can bestow. It has been awarded only twice in our 3,000-year history. We present it now to humanity for service beyond measure. Harrison accepted the crystal, then surprised everyone by offering it back. Keep it, Council Prime. We didn't do this for rewards or honors. We did it because you needed help and we could provide it. That's what allies do. That's what friends do. Viridian stared at the human admiral, understanding something fundamental about these strange, violent, compassionate beings. Then let this be the first day of a long friendship between our peoples, and let the galaxy know that humanity stands with the Vacrian coalition. The ceremony continued with formal speeches and diplomatic pleasantries, but the real work was happening elsewhere. Human ships remained in Vacrian space, helping rebuild what the Krelith had destroyed. Sergeant Amy Rodriguez found herself training Vacrian defense forces on a liberated colony world. The aliens were peaceful by nature, but they wanted to learn how to protect themselves. Rodriguez taught them the basics: how to hold a weapon, how to work as a unit, how to stay calm when everything was chaos. The key to surviving combat is not being fearless, she explained to a group of Vacrian recruits. It's being able to function despite your fear. Fear keeps you alive. It makes you careful. You just can't let it control you. The Vakrians struggled with concepts that came naturally to humans: aggression, violence, the willingness to hurt others to protect your own. But they tried, and Rodriguez was patient with them. Lieutenant Paul Grant worked with Vakrian engineers, helping them design better ship defenses. The aliens had excellent technology in many areas, but their weapons and armor were primitive by human standards. You built these ships for exploration and trade, Grant explained, reviewing their designs. That's admirable. But the galaxy has predators in it. Your ships need to be able to defend themselves. The Vakrian engineers took notes as Grant showed them how humans designed military vessels. Redundant systems, armored compartments, weapons that could actually hurt an enemy. It was a different way of thinking about technology. Lieutenant Jake Morrison spent his time teaching Vakrian commanders how to think tactically. The aliens were intelligent, but they struggled with military strategy. They had no evolutionary experience with organized violence. War is about making your opponent react to you, Morrison explained, moving pieces around a holographic battle map. You want to dictate the terms of every engagement. Fight where you're strong, avoid where you're weak, and always maintain the initiative. Captain Lisa Chen attended a memorial service on a liberated colony world. Thousands of Vakrians had died during the occupation. They gathered to remember the lost and to thank their liberators. A young Vakrian child approached Chen holding a flower. The child looked up at her with large, innocent eyes. "Thank you for saving us from the monsters." Chen knelt down to the child's level. "You're welcome. And you don't need to be afraid anymore. The monsters are gone." "Because humans are scarier than the monsters?" the child asked innocently. Chen smiled sadly. "No, because humans hunt monsters. It's what we do. It's what we're good at." Admiral Harrison returned to Earth to brief the President and the Defense Council. They met in a secure room deep beneath the Capitol. The leaders of humanity wanted to know what the fleet had learned out there among the stars. "What did we discover about ourselves, Admiral?" the President asked, her expression serious. Harrison considered the question carefully. He thought about the violence he had ordered, the lives he had taken, the ships he had sacrificed, but also the restraint his people had shown, the compassion, the willingness to risk everything to protect strangers. "We learned that being dangerous isn't the same as being evil," Harrison said finally. "Earth made us into apex predators. We evolved in a world that tried to kill us every day. We became good at violence because we had to be, but we chose what to do with that nature. We could have used our strength to conquer, to demand tribute, to build an empire. Instead, we used it to protect people who couldn't protect themselves." "And how did the galaxy react?" another council member asked. "Mixed reactions," Harrison admitted. "Some species are grateful. Others are terrified. Most are both. But they all know now that humanity is here, and that we protect our friends. That's a reputation worth having." The President nodded thoughtfully. "Then let's make sure we have many friends, Admiral, and that we never become the kind of monsters we fought." The story of the Krelith War spread across the galaxy faster than light, transmitted through every communications network. The details varied depending on who told the story, but the core truth remained the same. Aliens called for help. Human Deathworlders responded with total destruction. Other species watched and learned. They learned that humans were dangerous, yes, but that danger could be a shield as easily as a sword. They learned that Earth's children carried scars from their violent homeworld, but also its lessons about survival and protecting the pack. They learned that you didn't want humanity as an enemy, but if you could earn their friendship, you would never face danger alone. Months passed. The last remnants of the Krelith swarm were hunted down and eliminated. Vakrian worlds rebuilt with human assistance. Trade agreements were signed. Embassies were established. The two species began the slow process of becoming true allies. Captain Chen received new orders. The Retribution was being assigned to patrol the border regions between Vakrian and human space. It was a peacekeeping mission, but Chen knew the truth. They were there to send a message to anyone watching. This sector is protected now. Try something and you'll face humanity. She stood on her bridge looking at the stars through the viewports. Somewhere out there, other species watched and wondered what humanity would do next. Some feared them. Some hoped for their protection. All of them were trying to understand what it meant that Deathworlders had joined the galactic community. Let them wonder, Chen thought. Humanity would do what it always did: adapt, survive, protect those who needed protection. They were dangerous because Earth had made them that way, but they chose to use that danger for good. Rodriguez visited the graves of her fallen squad members on Earth before shipping out for another deployment. She placed flowers on each marker and stood in silence for a moment. "We did it," she said quietly to the graves. "We won, and we're going to make sure it meant something. Your sacrifice meant something." Admiral Harrison sat in his office late at night reviewing casualty reports. Over 2,000 humans had died in the war. Thousands more were wounded. Every death weighed on him. Every name on the list was someone's child, someone's friend, someone's love. But they had saved an entire species from extinction. They had stopped an invasion that would have consumed dozens of worlds. The math was brutal but simple. 2,000 human lives for millions of alien lives saved. He would make that trade every time. That was the burden of command. The galaxy continued turning. New threats would emerge. New challenges would arise. But now the galaxy knew about humanity. They knew that Earth had produced a species that was both terrifyingly violent and surprisingly compassionate. They knew that humans were apex predators who had learned to use their predatory nature to protect rather than destroy. They were dangerous precisely because danger had been necessary for survival. But they had channeled that danger into something purposeful. On a dozen worlds, Vacrian children grew up hearing stories about the humans who saved them. About the warriors from the Deathworld who fought monsters and won. About Captain Chen and Admiral Harrison and Sergeant Rodriguez and all the others who had risked everything to protect strangers. The stories became legends. The legends became truth. And the truth was simple. Humanity had come to the stars. They brought with them all the violence and aggression and danger of their brutal homeworld. But they also brought compassion, honor, and an absolute refusal to let the strong prey upon the weak. They were Deathworlders. They were warriors. They were protectors, and the galaxy would never be the same again. In a quiet moment aboard the Retribution, Chen recorded a message for future generations. It would be stored in Earth's archives, a record of humanity's first war among the stars. "We were called to help people we'd never met fight an enemy we'd never seen," she said to the camera. "We went because it was the right thing to do. We fought because we were good at it. We won because we refused to quit. And we came home knowing that Earth's children had finally found their place among the stars, not as conquerors, not as tyrants, but as the people who stand between the innocent and the dark. That's who we are. That's who we choose to be. And I hope we never forget the